Hi, John. Sorry. Hi, James. Hi, Anne. Hi, Chantal. Sorry, just started a tad bit earlier, so we'll just wait for the rest of the attendees to join. Hi, Darren. So we got hi, Tim. Just leave it another minute or two. Hi, Stephen. Awesome, cool. We'll make a start and then got a few more joining as we begin. So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar called The Dark Side of the Prompt, Weaponized AI, Modern Attacks and How to Protect Your Business. So we're joined today by Sasha from Huntress. He's going to talk through the latest threats that businesses face, how hackers actually hack, and how MDR works to protect your business. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions at all, feel free to pop them in the chat. We've got Jamie from Huntress and John from System Magic on hand to answer any. We'll also have a short Q&A at the end. The webinar is being recorded and I'll distribute the recording and the slides after to everyone, so you have a copy. And yeah, without further ado, I'll pass over to Sasha.
Okay, amazing. So, yeah, just some house rules. If for whatever reason my internet goes or it starts getting choppy, please put that onto the chat so we can be able to just switch over. I've got 2 broadbands for that very reason. Any questions, absolutely on the Q&A section. Jamie will be looking after that. But without further ado, I am so excited to be able to introduce this particular presentation. It is something that I put together specifically for this webinar. So for those who don't know me, I am a senior sales engineer at Huntress. I do a lot of education content. I've got a YouTube channel. I've even got a Spotify. I don't sing, but it's all my podcasts that I do. So if you want to have a little follow, please do, because there's a lot of good content out there on just general cyber security. So we've got a jam-packed agenda today. We've got things which are focusing on the threat landscape of 2025, but also 2026 as well. I don't want to just talk about that on one particular slide. That's actually going to be throughout the entire webinar as well. And then we want to talk about endpoint threats, endpoint vulnerabilities, and how attackers are effectively getting access to our environment through endpoints. And then talking about identities, I think identities are just as valuable as endpoints nowadays, if not more, because if I had one endpoint, if I had one identity, I could do far more damage with an identity than I could do with one endpoint. So token theft, how do hackers actually get access to your Microsoft 365 environments? But also talk about in cybersecurity minutes do matter, and showing you each minute of a cybersecurity incident and how Huntress is able to be able to tackle that. And then we're going to focus on the Huntress Managed EDR, which stands for Endpoint Detection and Response, and then the Huntress Managed ITDR, which is Identity Threat Detection and Response. So there's a lot of acronyms in cybersecurity. My job is to be able to make sure that we don't go through acronyms, and we are trying our best to be able to educate. So, threat landscape. Let's just pull back a little bit and just understand something which is, I think a lot of people get shocked when they do hear this, is when we talk about the global economies out there, you know, you've got the US, which is $31.1 trillion. I mean, that is a lot right there. You got China, I would say not too far behind, but if you would have seen China 10 years ago, that is a different number. So 19.7 trillion. But the third largest economy in the world is cybercrime, with nearly $12 trillion to its name. Why is that? Is that because, you know, people are just falling for the same things? Yes, to some extent. Artificial intelligence is having a massive impact with cybercrime. But here's the thing. It's the fact that hackers are always finding new tradecrafts. They are always finding new ways. And in cybersecurity, it's natural that we are always one step behind. It's the same thing with kind of like police and crime. You know, a crime occurs, then the police have to then deal with that crime and try to ensure that that doesn't happen again. But they'll find a new way. And that's the thing within cyber security. We are also running into that. We are one step behind and trying to catch up with the new tradecraft. And this is the new tradecraft. This is things that are making out onto the news, BBC News, ITV, whatever it may be. But I'll be honest with you, this is probably top 0.01% of threats out there that actually make it to the news. Not everything makes it to the news because there are just far too many attacks happening. There is a dedicated website out there that will tell you when ransomware has been detonated on a organization, and when they disclose that to the ICO, that you'll be surprised at how many a day threats are being detonated within environments, but they don't make it to the news. This only made it to the news because these are well-known names: M&S, Land Rover, and Jaguar, for example. So I speak to a lot of people every single day. It's one of the most fantastic parts of my job, is to be able to meet new people and build relationships with them. But it's something common I hear every day is, Sash, I'm too small to be attacked. You know, there are much more bigger fish in the sea. Why would somebody look at me when there's something like M&S and Jaguar Land Rover? Obviously, you can imagine I hear a lot, but the statistics don't lie. So in 2025, the entire year, 43% of UK businesses suffered a cyber breach. Out of that 43%, 70% of them were small to medium-sized organizations. 85% of that involved phishing in some way or manner within that breach. And the average SMB breach cost is £75,000 per incident. Some organizations deal with multiple incidents per year. It is not uncommon. But it's not just the actual breach itself, it's the reputational damage. It's the things that last past the actual breach itself, and what sort of information is being actively sold on the dark web. But then it starts getting quite interesting, where you have the average threat dwell time is 10 to 12 days. That is how long a hacker can stay within your environment. A couple of years ago, that used to be 120 days. So are we saying, Sash, is cybersecurity getting better, so we don't need to worry about that so much? Well, yes, to some extent, cybersecurity is absolutely getting better, but so are attackers. The difference between that 120 days and 10 to 12 days is that attackers are not needing as much time to be able to get to the pot of gold effectively. But they're not. Why would they need to waste their time when that would dramatically increase their risk of being detected? So they are waiting there for the right moment and pouncing, and they're finding that right moment much more quicker. And the average recovery time to get fully back up and operational is around 30 days. And the question we should be asking ourselves is, could I experience not being fully operational for 30 days? Most organizations would say no. So what's changed since 2025? RMM abuse, that's a remote monitoring and management software that would effectively allow MSPs or other organizations, or even yourselves, to remote into other machines and run particular scripts and different sorts of factors like that. That has increased by 277%. Hackers are wanting to be able to take over your RMM because of the sort of permissions it can be able to allow them to have. Ransomware has increased 88% in a year. Credential thefts, stealing Microsoft 365 credentials, is 160%. And again, that dwell time is now 10 to 12 days. It has gone down year on year. So these are quite serious figures with what I've seen. So the common targets are the endpoints. Okay. So how does it start? Trusted tools as weapons. That's what hackers are effectively utilizing. They're abusing tools which are legitimate, which if somebody had started that up, I'm not going to be worried about that. because they're legitimate tools which are authorized within our organization. A common one could be your RMM, for example. A common one could be a particular, maybe a particular tool, a development tool that your team uses. And then they create persistence. So initial access, they gain access to your environment by utilizing the correct tools. Then they want to be able to try and stay within your environment for as long as possible. As we mentioned, 10 to 12 days. By creating persistence, by scheduling tasks, changing the run keys, for example, and effectively surviving a reboot on your machine. That dwell time increases. They're trying to stay within your environment for as long as possible, trying to look for the right moments. And then what we are needing over here is that traditional antiviruses are no longer detecting these sort of threats. Okay, I can spin up new malware within artificial intelligence utilizing, Claude code, for example, that has never been seen before. And as we know, an antivirus is looking for the known threats out there. But what about the threats that have never been seen before? That is why we need behavioral detection. This is the killer for hackers on endpoints right there. So endpoints is one concern, but the second concern is identities. And one of the ways that hackers could be able to gain access to your 365 environment or even Google Workspace, whatever you may be using, is token theft. A lot of the people are saying, you know what, Sasha, they gained access to my environment. How did they do that? Well, this is probably the way that they ended up doing it. Token theft. Now, first of all, what is a token? So I like to use analogies in cybersecurity. An analogy I have for a token is, imagine if you go to a festival, or it could be a concert. You walk to the venue, you've got this massive bouncer bodyguard there that's kind of verifying everybody, making sure that you have purchased your tickets, provide us your identification so we can vet that it should be you coming into this venue. So I give them my identification, I give them my proof of purchase. So they say, okay, Sasha, you can go ahead and walk in. But before you go ahead, we need to make sure that, you are who you are. So we're going to give you your lanyard. We're going to give you a wristband so people know who you are. You walk in. After 1 hour of me listening to my Beyonce or Taylor Swift, whatever it may be, I walk out because I'm cold and I want to get something from my car. I'm a little bit chilly. I want to get my coat. I get my coat. And then I come back in the same way that I entered previously. But it's not the same bodyguard. It's not the same bouncer. Somebody much more bigger this time. But he doesn't need to go through that long process of authenticating me. He just sees that I've got my wristband and lanyard. And he said, you've already been authenticated. That's the correct color code. You can walk straight in, Mr. Roshan. It's nothing that you need to do. Imagine if someone stole my wristband or lanyard. They could basically walk in and be me. And no one would be the wiser. No one would try to question me, for example, if I'm not doing anything suspicious. So hackers want to be able to steal your wristband and lanyard. Now, there's two ways that tokens could be stolen. That's passively, and that could be through the dark web. This is why when breaches occur, it's incredibly important to be able to make sure that you disclose this, and also that your rotating credentials, etc. Because if someone has stolen your credentials and had sold that on the dark web, somebody, such as myself, could log into the dark web, download that, and utilize those credentials if they have not been changed. This is passive session token theft. This happens all the time. However, if we don't have anything on the dark web for that identity, maybe we want to do something a little bit more targeted. So everyone here probably logs in again with their username, which is their email, their password, and their MFA. If you log into your 365, in the back end, it will create a session. Ever wondered when, and this is across many websites, when you log in, ever wondered when you close the tab and you reopen it 5 minutes later, you are still logged in and you don't need to authenticate again? That's because of your session, all right? Now, when you log into 365, you get access to everything there, all right? That's all good. We're all happy with that. Now, my hacker, she can guess your username because it's your email address. That is not hard to find. Especially if you reuse passwords or, again, if it's sold out on the dark web. But she never has your MFA. Why do we think that? Because that is related to your mobile phone or something which is you don't know off by heart. It's something you have. Something you know is your username, your password. Something you have is your MFA. Something you are is biometrics, such as your fingerprints. Okay, so this is something you have. So my hacker, she's quite upset because she does not have your MFA code. So she downloads a tool called EvilJinx, which is completely free on the internet. I have YouTube videos on how to be able to utilize this. You can be an expert within an hour. It is not that complicated. So Evil Jinx is downloaded, and what it does is sits in the middle between the target and the destination, and it basically sniffs everything. It captures all the information. And guess what? It starts with an email. And that email is something that's going to be quite convincing. Urgent action required on your Microsoft account. Now, I get people that say, Sasha, I'm probably not going to fall for that. I do my security awareness training. Well, hang on. Things are evolving. Okay. This is on my LinkedIn. This got 30,000 views. I know it was only 220 interactions, but I had so many reposts on that, 49 reposts, because they were absolutely shocked as what they saw. So if you have a look at this is a very convincing template of Microsoft. It's a password reset request, and it's Microsoft. So that's the header. But the sender email is no reply at lowercase r, lowercase n, Microsoft.com rather than Microsoft. But look from the distance, I can't see the difference over here. But if I zoom in, I can see lowercase r, lowercase n, Microsoft.com. And it gets even harder when you have a mobile phone looking through emails. So if you're using Outlook or Gmail, whatever you may be using on your email, you actually don't get to see the sender email by default. You actually only get to see the header. So if you saw the most perfect template ever and you didn't see anything wrong with it, are you really going to check every time that send the email? Probably not. And this is how hackers are starting to fool people. So they are waiting for that right moment, or should I say that wrong moment for you, but the right moment for them, for you to be clicking on something that you shouldn't do because you're driving and you're on your mobile phone, or you're in a rush in a tube or the train and you're on your mobile phone. And it's not, if it's not just the mobile phone, it's actually the PC itself, because that is very hard to be able to see. So this is called typo squatting. It's basically making it look like an official domain by utilizing special characters. And then you have the template that when you click on that link, you now are asked to be able to log into Microsoft 365. Nothing looks suspicious on this right now. Evil Jinx contains templates. Templates which are available for anyone to use that are utilizing Evil Jinx, PayPal, Amazon, 365. So all of these could be able to do quite a lot. And this is just some of them. This is not all of them, by the way. And that is Evil Jinx. It's a transparent proxy. So it sits in the middle. So that user, that target, had clicked on the link, is now looking at this page and now entering their username and password into that page, not knowing something in the middle is collecting all of that information. So the username and password is being sent. Now, this is the thing. This is where the hacker's rubbing her hands together, because this is the one thing she did not have, which was the MFA. So that now gets sent back to the target, and the target, again, does not see anything wrong with that, passes the MFA, and then that MFA is now sent over to the site, and the session is collected. So adjacent to that, we actually now are collecting all of that information, plug it into the real Microsoft 365 login page, and this target is none the wiser, knowing that that session has now been collected. And we can see on Evil Jinx, this is what Evil Jinx would look like, is we've got the actual templates, the username, the password, and also the session itself. So all the hacker now needs to do is to log into the Microsoft 365 page, or get that page open on the browser itself. If it's Google Chrome, edit the cookie editor, paste that session, refresh the page, and they've got access to Microsoft 365 with your credentials, because they have a combination of your username, your password, and your MFA, which makes that session. Now, what do you think they're going to be doing? Do you think they're just going to be snooping around to see what they could find? No, they know exactly what to do immediately. They're going to start making password changes. They're going to start making MFA changes, for example, so they could stay there and keep you locked out. So they would also start creating inbox rules, and they'll start saying anything with invoice, payment, manager, I want it sent out to an external domain. They can access any SSO application that you have access to, because it's your identity. And then they may also want to be able to utilize applications within Microsoft 365, which they can abuse for permissions. They could create backdoors to leave and come back anytime they wanted to. So remember when we talked about persistence with the endpoints? This is the same thing with the identity over here. Now, I'm not showing you all of this to be able to try and scare people. That's not what I do. I'm here to educate. But I do want to say that the Huntress ITDR, which is the Identity Threat Detection and Response, does cover these scenarios. Out of 100% of the detections that we have within Huntress for the identity side, we have around 12 to 15% related to this particular attack by itself. That is an extraordinary amount considering we look after over 11 million identities globally right now. So in cybersecurity, 100% I agree with this. Minutes do matter. So minute 0, it starts with a phish. Okay, that email is coming through. And then they're asking you to click on that link, click on that particular Microsoft 365 email that's come through. It looks like Microsoft 365. And then you're entering your MFA. That happens. That's token. You're experts of this right now. So now they're starting to download some applications. Minute 1, those signals start to be generated for the SOC team. They are now reviewing all the activities that's happening just on that identity by itself. Minute 1, we can see that they are now starting to snoop around emails, passwords, MFA resets, invoices. So they're now creating inbox rules. So anything that contains any of these subject words, I want it sent over to my external domain that I have control over. Minute 2, the SOC team are still reviewing what's happening. They're seeing all of this new telemetry, all of this new logs and data, and they're trying to work out exactly what's happening. Minute 3, the hacker is now pivoting. Hackers do not like to stay in the same environment for too long because they know that dramatically increases their risk. So they start to pivot by sending emails to other people saying, hey, download this file. And then that malware starts to get downloaded on the machine. This is why having your ITDR and your EDR deployed across your entire environment will save you in the long run. Because now that malware that's been downloaded may look like a Word document, but all of a sudden that Word document is starting to interact with PowerShell and scripts and other sorts of services that a normal Word document wouldn't. Hunters know the 10, the 12 different things a Word document can and should do. And as soon as it steps out of those 10 or 12 things, it's no longer treated as a Word document, it's treated as malware. So this is now happening on another endpoint that has EDR on there. Minute 6. The SOC team are seeing everything. We can see what's happening on the particular endpoint and also the identity that was compromised as well. And we are collecting all the information to be able to see what exactly is the next steps that we need to do. Minute 7, on that same endpoint, that hacker is now trying to create persistence. They're trying to stay within the environment for as long as possible. So on the endpoint, they are creating different startup programs so they can survive a reboot. They want to be able to make sure that their application that they have control over will always start up when that machine turns on again. And from the identity perspective, what they're doing now is that they want to be able to effectively ensure that they have backdoor access to that environment all the time. And they're doing that with downloading OAuth applications, open authentication applications. Minute 8, the Huntress SOC team are putting the pieces to the puzzle together. They're now figuring exactly what's happened and what's going on and what the hacker's next move is. Minute 8, we then shut it down. We lock down the endpoint, we lock down the identity. They can't be able to log back into the identity or the endpoint that they ended up compromising as well, because what they ended up doing was laterally moving onto another machine. Lateral movement is basically hopping on from one endpoint to another or one organization to another to be able to spread their malware. So we've blocked those entities. Minute 12, the hacker is still trying to log back in, but it's failing. We're not able to do anything now because we've completely cut that endpoint from communication. Minute 15, we typically see that that's when they give up. They can't be able to do anything else because we completely locked them down. And then that's when we communicate out to the organization, let them know that this is what we've ended up doing. This is what we end up recommending you to do. Rotate credentials, for example, and Huntress would have already removed that malware on the machine as well. Hunters have a mean time to respond of 8 minutes. That is pretty quick, in my opinion, with everything that's going on out there. So with all the gaps that we've just effectively shown, with all the issues, with all the threats that we've just spoken about, it's time to fight back. And how are we going to fight back? We're going to utilize the Huntress Managed Security Platform. So the quote of the day is that it's not hard to find good technologies out there, in my opinion. I think there are beautiful vendors out there that do an excellent job, but that's not only the thing that we should be focusing on. It's actually hard to find right people behind the technology, the right people behind the tech that actually make that difference. And we believe Huntress have the right people behind the tech. because we have the right teams that work with those MSPs, such as System Magic, in order to be able to provide that quality service. Okay, security analysts, threat hunters, researchers, detection engineers. These are the teams that are working 24/7 behind the scenes on exactly what we need to look out from reacting, but also proactively looking out for threats as well. So we're not just a reactive team. We also look out for things which potentially could lead up towards an actual breach. So there's two tools I want to go through, and that is the EDR, endpoint detection and response. Now, what is an EDR for anyone that doesn't know? Typically on endpoints, you would have an antivirus. Okay, an antivirus by itself is quite limited with what it can do. An antivirus is looking for the known threats out there, threats that have never been, threats that have been seen before, that have a verdict. This is a particular file. We've seen that before. We know it's malicious. We are going to block it. This is the next file. We have seen it before. We've seen that it is benign. We're going to let it through. But what happens if it's never been seen before? It could potentially go to a sandbox environment, which takes too long, or it lets it through. And that's the concerning portion. This is where an EDR needs to be used, because it will start to look for new malware missed by antivirus, unknown threats, and that's the biggest one, especially in today's age, where I can spin up new malware within minutes utilizing AI that have never been seen before. And then you've got suspicious activity that needs human investigation. And the issue that we see with a lot of organizations, Sasha, I don't have the time nor the resources to internally deal with this sort of noise. So I don't have the time to be up and running 24 hours. We only work 9 to 5. So if something goes boom 1 o'clock in the morning, I don't want to wake up middle of the night to have to deal with that incident. I don't have the talent. I don't have the internal resources. We don't have the expertise in-house to deal with these threats. And hiring out a dedicated SOC analyst is incredibly expensive in-house, which is why we've partnered up with System Magic in order to be able to provide this particular service. So the Huntress Managed EDR, so we are AV agnostic. We're happy for you to utilize any antivirus, but we do have a very special relationship with Microsoft. So if you're utilizing Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, if you have a business premium license, or even the free Microsoft antivirus, you can still use that. Absolutely. We're not going to take that away. We will just absorb the telemetry. We will pull the logs from these solutions within Microsoft, where we can be able to have access to that data and start to detect things earlier on where necessary. Now, again, if you don't have Microsoft, we are AV agnostic, okay? But it's with Microsoft that we have extra visibility because of the telemetry that we pull, and we'll help manage that as well. Now, on every endpoint, you will have a Huntress EDR agent, okay? Microsoft makes up to less than 6% of our overall detections. The actual power starts to come from the EDR itself, where we look for malicious process behavior. So remember that Word document acting suspiciously, that will pick that up. We've got ransomware detections and protections as well, such as our ransomware canaries. But when something flags up as suspicious, the human-led investigation takes place, where you actually have a real human behind the tech looking at that, where they will triage, investigate, they will threat hunt. The beauty of having multiple technologies with Huntress is the threat hunting, that we could be able to cross-platform detect and respond. So if we saw an EDR threat that maybe has an info stealer, so for anyone that doesn't know what an info stealer is, that is designed to steal credentials on your machines. Some of those credentials may be saved on your browser, such as, guess what, Microsoft 365. So even the EDR can detect that, and we can respond not just with the EDR, but also with the identity side of the house that we have with Huntress. We have a mean time to respond of 8 minutes. We have a false positive rate of 0.7%. And when we do find a threat, we need to respond. We can kill that process. We can delete the file, and we can even isolate the machine. Most of the times, we don't need to even isolate the machine. We can be very particular with how we want to respond by being most effective, least disruptive to that organization. And then finally, we'll communicate with your MSP, with that System Magic, in order to be able to provide instant response and communications and work with them to be able to provide that quality service that you're experiencing with this. And this all happens with a mean time to respond of 8 minutes. And as you could be able to see, SOC receives alerts, 8 minutes. On average, we will close the incident and effectively push out some sort of next steps or remediations. Now, ITDR, Identity Threat Detection and Response. I love this one because Identities, as I mentioned, with business email compromise are starting to explode. Hackers are definitely abusing them. So this is why I think this has started to become incredibly important. So fundamentally, we should have our endpoints covered. We should have our identities covered. Then we can start looking at things like security awareness training and other solutions. In order to be able to have an effect immediately, you need your detect and response tools. Your EDR and your ITDR will provide that for you. Your human-led investigation remains the same for ITDR. Your communication remains the same for ITDR. But the way that we detect and the way that we respond does differ. Detection, session hijacking. You guys are experts of that because we went through that. Token theft, that is part of session hijacking. Inbox rules, rogue applications. So we look for things of how hackers are trying to gain access to Microsoft 365, but how they're also trying to stay within Microsoft 365. That takes us to our investigation. Communication system magic remains the same. Remediation does differ because we're not focusing on the endpoint anymore. We are focusing specifically on the identity. So we can be able to revoke the session. We could be able to effectively boot out a user from logging in from Microsoft 365. We can isolate that identity. We can delete that inbox rule and we can delete that rogue application. We can do a lot from that. So really, you don't need to lift a finger anymore. And we have a 3-minute mean time to respond for the ITDR. So if people thought 8 minutes was fast, this gets even more aggressive. Now, there's a couple of slides left. This quote really does hit home for me, which I wanted to share with you. So this is from our annual threat report from the Huntress SOC team. So all too often, the biggest vulnerability isn't a 0-day exploit, it's humans. We get tired, we get distracted, and we click things we shouldn't. These seemingly innocent mishaps turn a normal Tuesday, in my opinion, a bloody nightmare. I don't want to see any organization middle of the night have to effectively deal with an incident by themselves. This is why you need that 24/7 coverage. Humans are still the largest sort of risk we have in organizations. They're clicking on things they shouldn't do. It is normal, unfortunately. And every organization, a good organization, should be approaching cybersecurity that I trust my, not that I trust my staff, they wouldn't click on it, that they are unfortunately flipping that around, say, I am going to assume every user is going to click on that link. Now what do I do? That's where your ITDR comes into play. That's when your EDR comes into play. So you're effectively playing almost a game within your mind. If this happens, what's next? What's next? What sort of protections do I have? So that's the way that we should be approaching cybersecurity nowadays. Not if, but when in cybersecurity. So there's one video that I wanted to share, which was this video over here. So this was created by one of our product managers, and it was actually pretty cool. So I wanted to share that with you guys.
In cybersecurity, we used to talk about firewalls and networks as the perimeter. That perimeter's gone. Today, identity is the new perimeter, or at least that's what we said like 5 years ago. And yet, years after that shift, we're still making the same mistakes over and over again. Right now, I'm your CTO. I can approve access, I can change configs, I can move money, expose data with a couple of clicks. Or maybe I'm your CEO. Look at this. Everybody trusts my emails. No one questions my authority. But here's the problem. It's 2026, and it's incredibly easy for anyone to look like these people.
With AI, I can steal a password, clone a face, fake a voice.
And suddenly, I am your leadership team.
When you can't believe your eyes or your ears,
It's good to know that there's always someone that you can trust.
So just to mention, that actually was my senior leadership team. So that was my CEO, CTO, and CFO right there. And it was quite easy to get that image of them and to be able to effectively make them do whatever I want. So that is pretty cool. And that was designed by our our product managers, where he'd done an absolutely excellent job on that. But besides that, that was pretty much what I wanted to present. I hope you found this informative, and I'd like to thank you for listening. Any questions, if there is any? But that is my QR code. So again, you can scan that. It's not a malicious. Trust me, I wouldn't do that to you guys. So you can scan that. That is my LinkedIn if you ever wanted to be able to just give a follow. And there's education content that I send out every week on that, on just general cybersecurity. But yes, if there's any questions, feel free to ask. It doesn't have to just be Huntress related. Could be just general cybersecurity. So I'm here for the next 10 minutes or so.
Thank you, Sasha. That's really insightful. Really interesting. I know we say about hacks, but being able to see how hackers actually hack and the process behind it and how easy it can be with the right tools was really interesting. Yeah, if you guys do have any questions, feel free to either pop them in the chat, or if you want to learn more about MDR or ITDR, feel free to reach out to John or myself at Systemagic, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions, run through how you can adopt it in your business, the process behind that, costs, etc. Like Sasha said, we'll stay on online for a couple of minutes if there are any questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
So looks like quite a few are leaving now. So yeah, if we wrap up there, thank you again, Sasha. That was really, really insightful. Oh, sorry, Darren. Do you have a question at all? Because I can unmute you if you need. Okay, no worries at all. Yeah, thank you again, Sasha, and we'll be circulating the recording and the slides after for anyone who wants to recap. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone.